Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Man, I've got a cool SG for you guys today.
So, as I normally do, I'm shopping Reverb late at night. This thing just happens to show up for a nice price. I sent him an offer, and he's like,
Hey man, I've got all these offers for this thing out of nowhere, but I notice you are in the same state as me, so if you can pay me X amount of money, it's yours. So I'm like, sure, here you go. Here's the new offer. Let's go ahead and do it. Now, I've actually already documented this model before, but it was the other version. So we are going to teach you all about what is considered the SG Elegant today. But before we move into that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at this before we learn all about it. Inside our beautiful Gibson custom shop case, we have this thing. Okay, so this SG does not look like any other SG you've seen before, now does it? It's got a maple top, it's got black binding abalone inlay, and to make matters even crazier, it's a Les Paul and it has a red headstock. Man, this thing is just so bizarre and out there. So let's go ahead and dive in a little bit to the history of the SG Elegant. And to do that, we actually need to jump back to 1997 to the Les Paul Elegant. That was essentially the second series of Les Pauls that featured a custom shop chambering within them. They had so many different color options. You could find them in flame and quilt tops. They were just highly specced out and adorned Les Pauls. The earlier ones had these really big, gaudy custom shop emblems on their headstock, and then later on they phased those out for a normal looking headstock, but they were just beautiful guitars. I mean, look at all these ones on the screen. They just got so much going on, but at the same time, that's why some players don't like them. They're a bit too gaudy. If you want to check out some Elegant videos, I have one right here, or you could check out my Mummy Les Paul. It's based on Elegant specs. But when the Les Paul Elegant was discontinued in 2004, the SG Elegant rose from its ashes. Technically, it came out around 2003-ish. There's not a lot of information out there on the SG Elegants, but they had a short run around 2003 to 2007. And they looked like this one that I did a previous review and demo on. They had the striking abalone inlays. They had crazy tops, like that quilt top. I kind of regret selling that SG. That thing is just crazy. But it had the normal binding on it and a regular styled headstock. But then the next time you see the Elegants come back is around 2017, and then into 2018 they introduced the version 2 Elegant, as I will call it. This is a version 2.
It appears the official title for these guys might actually be Tigers for version 2, because take a look at the box right here, it actually calls this Red Tiger finish. I was able to look online, I found a blue tiger and a green tiger within the SG lineup, and a few other mentions of tigers. But at least within the SG Elegant Tigers, they do have the matching headstock, not necessarily true on the other tiger finishes that Gibson has done.
What makes it different? You get the colored headstock and you get the black binding instead of the cream. Other than that, yeah, I mean, these are very similar guitars. This particular one is a flame top versus that other one being a quilt. So it just kind of makes sense to document the second version of this as well as the different kind of top since the other one was quilty. So these are just kind of weird, quirky SGs for somebody who likes the fanciness of Les Pauls, but likes the SG body shape because, you know, it's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit lighter, they just like the way they sound. It doesn't really matter. Your options for really fancy SGs are kind of limited, to be honest. But this is one that definitely will catch people's attention. And you can find them in other ones than red. Like this is kind of like a pale red color, because then you get to the back, it's this super cherry mahogany. It just looks like a normal SG from the custom shop, right? But you can find them in blue, there's green ones, you can find them in quilt and flame tops. You could custom order them for multicolors like the Aurora Borealis. But that's pretty much the gist of these things. They have fancy maple tops and they got abalone inlays. Binding colors may vary as well as the headstock colors. Let's see, what other kind of case candy did I get on this one? Looks like our normal pre-packed checklist. This one dates to pretty early 2018. We've got our switch tip in there and our custom shop booklet that houses our certificate of authenticity, billing it once again as a SG Elegant F for flame top. If it was a quilt top, it'd have a Q. But first impressions of this thing, It's really light. That last one, I remember the body was ridiculously heavy on it. Like the maple top added a lot. And when I call this thing a top, it's literally like half the SG. They might as well just made these things all maple. So it kind of ties into the SG Supra and some other models that also have flame tops on SGs. But this one's really light, but I don't think it's going to be so light that we have neck dive. I mean, we'll find out. It's got kind of a chunky neck for an SG. Like, it's not overly thick, but it's nice and rounded. But man, this feels so strange. I don't know. SGs, especially the custom shop ones that are built a little bit differently with the neck slightly hoisted up right there. The necks just feel so long on them. And it's strange to have this rounded neck profile. It looks like somebody did replace the nut on this one, but it looks like they did a pretty clean job, all things considered. So I'm looking forward to taking a look at this on the workbench and then getting to that playing demo. So without any further ado, let us do just that. Inside the SG Elegant, let's learn about version 2. So, what are our pickups in here? They're actually pretty high-end Gibson custom buckers. They read patent applied for on the back. But the spec sheets call them custom buckers. How do you identify them versus like a 57 Classic or whatnot? Honestly, without a spec sheet, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I mean, I guess you can look at their readings, you could look at the magnet type, but to identify them outside of, tearing them apart to get more information, yeah, then I don't know what to tell you. But while we're in here, let's get our pickup readings. 7.92 in our bridge, neck position, 7.9, and then the middle position, both of those together, 3.95. So the bridge pickup looks about the same, and here's what the routes in here look like. So you can see it's a ridiculously thick maple top. It's the same thickness as what you would find on like a Les Paul, because the mahogany body doesn't even begin until the very end of that. So pretty much everything that is routed out here is the maple top. It didn't even get to the mahogany back yet. You can see that same phenomenon here within the neck pickup cavity, and you can see that it is an ultra long neck tenon. And if I'm not mistaken here, I think these are actually thicker than regular SGs. I don't have one to compare it to, but it's about 1.36 inches thick. I could be wrong on that, but hey, the spec is there if you want to compare it to yours. But it looks like chrome hardware on this one, and you're going to notice, I forgot to point this out, these SGs do not have any type of pick guards. Well, at least these pick guards. They do still have what is considered the tenon cover, though. It's basically just a tiny little pick guard that covers over the tenon. Like what we're talking about in here, the long neck tenon where the neck meets the body. Now, sometimes this transition area is really disgusting looking, but this one has such a dark piece, it just looks like additional flame figuring. So they probably could have got away with not even having a tenon cover on there. It just kind of looks strange having a gap right there. But I mean, if you wanted to, you could leave it off, but I'm going to put it back on because that just looks right to me. But continuing on, what makes a custom shop SG special? You get a straight up ABR1 bridge drilled directly into the top. This ain't no faux BR1 from the Gibson USA shop, it's the real deal. Basically, the theory is since it's drilled directly into the top, you get better resonance and string vibrations traveling through the whole guitar rather than it being inside a stud, kind of like the tailpiece is. But surprisingly enough, on this one, I found a full-weight advanced plating incorporated tailpiece. I was expecting a lightweight one, but I'm guessing since it's an SG, they use the heavier ones to help fight neck dive. But this thing is just so light in general. I remember that quilty top one being a boat anchor, but it has been a couple of years. But 3-way toggle switch, regular volume controls, tone controls, nothing too fancy here. Output jack on the front. That would have been cool if they would have put it on the side. They definitely have enough room. But let's just go ahead and show you that side profile view again. Flame maple top with the mahogany back. I would almost say that the flame maple top looks thicker than the mahogany, but that just might be light discoloration. Or it just depends where you're looking. Like the edges, it's all contoured, so you don't see as much. But a true good comparison is right here. It's a 50-50. But you can see that seam line. So it still is a 2-piece maple top with a 1-piece mahogany back. But moving on from those specs, we have a straight up mahogany neck with a very nice piece of rosewood on this. 22 medium jumbo frets and the abalone inlays, as we had mentioned earlier. And hey, don't forget the straight up black binding. It just kind of disappears and allows the abalone inlays to steal the show. But if you really zoom in, not only do you get the black binding, that means your nibs over top of the frets right here are also black. So it's just a really cool looking SG fretboard here. That black binding matches well with this kind of orangish red finish and then the piercing red on the back. Now I am curious if the SG Elegant has the compound radius of the Les Paul Elegant. But in taking my measurements, this looks to me like it's just a standard 12 inches up and down the neck. So unfortunately it doesn't get that cool attribute, but yeah, that's alright. Our nut measures 1.7 inches and increases to 2.06 by the 12th. First fret neck depth, 0.84, and by the 12th it beefs up to 0.94. So nice and full neck for this SG. It really comes down to the big C-shaped neck on this thing. I mean, this feels very large for an SG, because they're normally kind of wide and thin feeling, not fat. On the contour gauge at the 1st and 12th fret, you can see it's just a really big C-shaped neck. I mean, that's very big for an SG. Now this particular example had the nut replaced, and whenever somebody replaces a nut on a Gibson, usually there's going to be some finish damage along the edges. Once I get it strung back up, we'll take a closer look at that. This one, there's just a little bit of a finish chip on that side, and condition-wise, maybe a small chip out of the fretboard right there. But now onto the headstock. So it's kind of like Gibson Les Paul Widow vibes because they have the colored over headstock, but this is not technically part of the Widow series because they didn't spray over the binding a red color. I mean, there's technically no binding on the body to spray over, so it's just kind of its own thing that borrowed some elements from the Widow series, but it looks pretty cool. And just to clarify here, it's the entire headstock that's actually painted red. It still has that black veneer underneath it, so you don't necessarily see that everything else is red. But if you catch it in the light just right, you can see the red over top of the black. But normally you just see it over top of the mother of pearl logos. And again, you can find other colors, like there's green and blue if you would prefer something other than red, but this is like the king of the SGs, ultra red. And they're styling these after the very early SGs, 61, 63-ish, that are still called Les Pauls. That's one of the historic style truss rod covers. And the truss rod itself is right here. So as far as condition, this thing is actually in pretty good shape. I mean, there are some scratches on the headstock. I mean, it's not perfect condition, but, it's only, about 3 years old, so it shouldn't be that trashed. I noticed a few, small, light impressions on the top. And, maybe this isn't the most crazily flame top in the world, but it's nice. It's nice in person. Doesn't photograph as well as it looks. And I was kind of betting on that when I bought this one because, the seller's photos I was like, nah, it's not that nice, but I just want to document this model. But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out in person. But here you can see that slight finish damage I was talking about. Sometimes when people replace the nuts, they don't score it and it'll crack down the neck this way. So, I mean, this is relatively minor. Thankfully, the side that you actually look like came out pretty darn clean. So I would say that risk paid off for me because it was only disclosed in the description. There weren't any photos of it. But now it's time to move on to the backside. Inside here, we actually get bumblebee capacitors. Very nice custom shop specs here. All hand wired with the vintage style pots. I mean, this is a very highly spec'd out custom shop SG. Everything looks the way I would expect it to. You've got your strap buttons in your regular locations at the bottom of the guitar and right here by the heel. Now, what's kind of cool about these SG Elegants and some other custom shop SGs is this. So on that other SG Elegant I had, I was all freaked out because it was a dark finish and there was a finish crack line in the neck. It's like, uh-oh, is that a crack? No, so these are constructed very similar to check out my Flying V episodes, how they have a mahogany cap on the back of the heel that is an extension of the body. Now, I don't know for 100% sure if that's there just to make the neck stronger, less likely to break since it's in more contact with the body, but that'd be my best guess. But right here is a good line to see where the neck and body join together. Now, it's really only visible on that side because as you come here, I mean, the red finish hides it pretty well. I mean, you can see the differences between the tight mahogany wood grain and slightly more spaced out. But over here, I could not actually see a straight up line like I could on the other side. So I'm glad it was at least able to be shown on one part, but that might be something you might be curious about or just didn't know about. Yep, SG's got it too. Not all of them. Gibson USA's won't. That's just a custom shop spec on these guys. And of course, our mahogany wood grain on this, looking good, nice and dark, rounded neck profile as we were talking about earlier, and single ring, single line Kluson style tuners. And this one has a serial number of 081922. meaning 2018. Why 2018 and not 2008? Technically, it could be that. You just gotta look at specs and know what models was in existence. With this being a used guitar, it is very important to do a blacklight test. Make sure they weren't hiding anything, and that's why they were selling it. Especially on SGs, they are prone to having neck breaks. Now, it's kind of interesting. The tone knobs glow differently than the volume knobs. They're toppers. There must be a variance in how they create those. It's either that or they were replaced. Not a big deal on a 2018. It's kind of cool to see the abalone inlays glow on here. And our non-stock nut definitely glows a little bit differently. It's another way to view that finish chip. And the green over the red's kind of an interesting look, and our tuners are glowing crazy. But now on to the important bits. This is where we would probably see something like on the heel joint, but everything's looking good there. But by George, we've got a little bit of finish rub right here. No headstock breaks or cracks though. So that could be a stand that was just catching it right there, and that's actually a stand rash showing. But to me, it just looks like a little bit of the clear coat was rubbed. We are good to say I have officially accepted this guitar from the seller. And I can say, without a doubt, you're not going to have any issues with it if you buy it from me. All said and done, this weighs 6 pounds, 13.3 ounces. It feels pretty balanced when I put it on the scale, so I'm guessing we're not going to have any neck dive either, so this might be a really good guitar. But let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Alright, let's go ahead and talk tones. First off, this nut is way too high. So it makes playing chords literally impossible to be in tune. Like the guitar, relatively in tune. The chords, and I mean, that's like the bare minimum to put the chord down. So if you've got a heavy hand, you're gonna wanna take that nut out and file it down just a little bit. But I'm guessing this was probably set up for like slide playing. This is what I would consider like a medium action. Like it's okay past this point because you don't have to push down as hard because the nut's not as high. I've gotta say, really comfortable SG. No neck dive. I mean, maybe a little. I don't wanna say there's no neck dive because then somebody will buy it and go, oh, it neck dived. But it balances pretty well, I would say. I don't have to support the neck anyways. So let's go ahead and grab some tones out of this red beast. now that we know all about the SG Elegant in the second variation, as I call it, what are my final thoughts on this thing? It's a really comfortable and cool looking SG. If you're looking for something that's just a little bit different than your regular SG, like you're a guy like me, you like really fancy looking guitars, this is something you might consider if you don't like the look of regular SGs. Because let's face it, historic SGs, they're just not all that fancy. Like, they're cool, but I wouldn't ever call them fancy. These guys, they take them up a whole nother level. Now, having a maple top definitely changes the way that the guitar sounds a little bit because, you know, it's different tone woods. Whether you subscribe to that or not, it does have different woods, so you can at least be able to know that going into one of these things. They're a little bit expensive on the used market, but as compared to most other custom shop SGs, they're not that much more. It's just a little bit harder to find these. There's not always one available on the market, especially if you're searching for one of the colored headstock versions. Like, you have to have the green one. You might be waiting a while, and when you find it, you might have to shell out $4,500, $5,000, but it all just depends on the market. This particular one, very well balanced guitar. I can tell it's got some good tones, but it's just so difficult for me to play the way this guy has this very tall nut on it. So yeah, if you want a really cool slide guitar, this is great for that. But likely, if you want to purchase this from me and play it normally, you're gonna wanna have somebody knock that nut out and just shave it down a little bit. Like, it's just too tall yet. Which that shouldn't be much more than like $50 at a certified dealer that can do that kinds of stuff for you. But anyways, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.